Greetings from LA, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I would very much like to continue on with our journeys, our discussions, our discoveries, and our explorations with respect to the recent releases made by the Criterion Collection during this year of 2024. And that brings us to a title which has been designated by Criterion at spine number 1221. And this is a work which is described as being from the year 1982. And the name of the filmmaker is Rainer Werner Fassbinder. And the name of the work is QUERELLE. This is the brilliant, phenomenal, unforgettable film, which is described as being from the year 1982. And it is from the director, Rainer Werner Fassbinder. And this is written by Rainer Werner Fassbinder and also by Burkhard Riest, based upon the work by Jean Genet, and cinematography by Xavier Schwarzenberger. And Rolf Zetbauer is the set designer, and Barbara Baum costumes. There's so many things to say about the cinematography, the richness of the cinematography, and also the brilliant, extravagant, wonderfully memorable aspects of costumes and set decor. So we'll speak a little bit about that over the course of this video discussion. And those are but examples of the reasons for this film's brilliance. Another of such examples could be said to be the cast, included in which are people like Brad Davis and Franco Nero and Jean Moreau and others. This is the work which is, again, from the brilliant mind and imagination of Rainer Werner Fassbinder. And this is the work which is QUERELLE. QUERELLE, the film, the final film Fassbinder before his untimely passing, again from the year 1982. QUERELLE, at long last, comes to the Criterion Collection physical media catalog. It joins other Fassbinder films that exist in the Criterion Collection physical media catalog, and of course representations and examples of films that are part of his long, voluminous output of films. And maybe a series or a progression of works that could be said to be maybe subcategorizable. Categorizable, is that a word? In terms of various, say, subgroups or subcategories throughout his brilliant career. Brilliant, varied, and quite provocative works, and some of these quote-unquote chapters of his filmography, as it were, are described, I think, in really great detail in one of the supplements of this release of QUERELLE, which we'll talk a little bit about later in this Criterion release discussion. But yes, QUERELLE, the final feature work directed by Fassbinder, is given the Criterion physical media treatment, and my goodness, this is a film that is at many things at once. It is captivating, it is awe-inspiring, it is shock-inducing. It is a film that is filled with so much heat and sensuality and sexuality and passion and desire. It's also a film that is filled with a lot of theatricality and artifice. It is a film that is about levels of passion and power plays. It also is a film about maybe criminality and crime and killing and drugs and transactions of the sort. It's a film that has at its center a very mysterious and enigmatic character, which is the Brad Davis character of QUERELLE, around whom a lot of the swirl of, say, passion and desire and sexual tension and also the mechanics of the film, the plot progress and progression of the film, really swirl and surround in this way that is at some points very, um, very maybe brooding under the surface, maybe hinting at some kind of burst of violence or surprise or sexual passion to come on the one hand, and then on other hands, it really sort of bursts forth in a sense of kind of over the top artifice that is akin to theater, that is also showcasing a kind of maybe a sense of illusion that may or may not be withstanding or withholding the intense scrutiny of sort of the emotional throes that are part of the surroundings. And we have so many contradictions, so many sort of moments of heat and cold that I think are also meant to push us as viewers in many different directions, both in terms of a questioning of maybe the amoral or immoral mindset of our main character and his effect on the people and surroundings that are inhabiting this very world of QUERELLE that we are witness to as we watch this film. This is a film that has so many breadths and layers and scopes that I think it is a work that is at once something that really is it's really provocative. It sort of boggles the mind in certain manners of speaking on the one hand, and yet at the same time we are also reminded just how much of a human drama is at its core. You know, characters that maybe there are characters that betray other characters, other expectations of some kind of deep-rooted, intimate emotional relationships that have emotional and intimate and maybe even spiritual types of connections or the possibilities or hopes thereof that are also going hand in hand with the very need and heart and desire of deep and very maybe hope-inducing types of ways forward, you know, breaking free from certain, say, shackles of various environmental, say, structures and emotional structures that are part of the decor of Genet's universe and this Fassbinder's universe of QUERELLE, QUERELLE of Brest, or of the nightclub scene and the seaside town that has with it its own sensibilities and its own populace and its own corners that are populated with all walks of life on the one hand. So there's also this idea of the hopeful and the desired need for some kind of emotional connection going hand in hand with the needs of the physical and the sexual. And that is also very much, I think, part of the grammar and equation of this work. And also there is a kind of police procedural type of aspect. There's a sort of detective aspect of this film. There's also a kind of film noir aspect of this film. Characters that may or may not be going down certain paths of destruction that could be of their own making. There's also the sense of heated moments of betrayal and also temptation, as well as rivalry, as well as I mentioned, both the cynical and the hopeful, the hot and the cold, sort of the truly earnest moral, and then perhaps the dark and cynical immoral. And so we have many different characters who interact in this kind of lattice or network of space, and some characters interact with other characters who interact with other characters, and sometimes those interactions might have a transactional basis, and sometimes they might have an emotional basis, and sometimes there might be a hybrid of the two, or maybe even more. Sometimes there's a sense of rivalry and betrayal. There's maybe a sense of lies and deceit. There's also the sense of connection and desire and lust. Eroticism and sort of a almost a pure distillation of sexual needs in the context of the characters and their interactions. So this is a true kind of palette of a theater-based type of brilliant reliance on the almost the sort of pure distillation of artifice, in a manner of speaking, that is used in a very purposeful way to maybe highlight contradictions and to highlight differences in temperature. Again, heat and cold, the truly moral and the sort of the ultimately immoral or amoral. The quest and yearning for emotional connection and desire, followed by or in conjunction with maybe kind of ulterior motives and lies and betrayal and deceit, rivalry and compassion. And appearance and subterfuge, and all, again, this kind of swirl of a storm that has hints of a type of potential tempestuous nature that might come, as well as the sense of the ultimate direct bursts of passion and violence that are all part of the decor. And again, at the very core of this, at the very center of this heat cold contradictory dynamic, is this very enigmatic character portrayed by Brad Davis in this really so many great, brilliant, quirky choices that are made in terms of this performance, making it really quite a memorable one in terms of the types of throes of emotion that seem to be inspired by the character of Querelle around him on the one hand, but also almost a sense of the monotone nothingness of his character on the other hand. Again, a very embodiment of matter, antimatter. I mean, in many ways, it's in many ways, it's the ultimate expression of what one might call sort of the matter antimatter series of contradictions that make up this truly one of a kind, brilliant film, which is Querelle. So, if we were to try again, I'm very sorry for my sort of maybe overly broad expressions of this film. But if I were to try to, for instance, maybe describe the plot or story structure of this film, Querelle, I think we would focus in on, among other things, this group of sailors that is arriving in port in Brest, and among them is Querelle. Georges Querelle. This is the Brad Davis character, and he arrives on shore, and he is almost immediately introduced into this world, including sort of the bar, and this is one of the key areas of, or the key environmental settings of the film. And among the people that he meets his he meets the Jean Moreau character. He also meets his brother, Robert. And so there's also immediately a sense of a potential maybe sibling rivalry of sorts. And also, the more we maybe begin to know who this character, this mysterious character of Querelle is, a sort of anti-hero of Querelle, we begin to realize that there might be other almost perhaps even villainous or sinister things beneath the surface, because we are almost immediately too privy to aspects of Querelle's character which seem to be dealing with senses of or touches of the corrupt, and maybe even the criminal, and that involves deals with sort of drugs and opium, and also perhaps leading to a kind of maybe money switching hands that have sort of criminal linkages underlying them, that lead to escalations and even violence and death and murder as well. So Querelle is maybe, he is our main character. He is also maybe described as an anti-hero. He also could be described as a character that has maybe amoral or immoral approaches to the characters that we meet. We see him performing, say, acts of violence towards other characters that are very disturbing indeed. And so we are, as viewers, I think, questioning our sort of moral allegiances with his character. And I think especially too, as I alluded to before, the sort of matter, antimatter, this is almost the monotone sort of even keel nature of Brad Davis's performance on the one hand, while we see too all the sort of chaos of violence and mayhem that is inspired around him in terms of this one aspect of the plot line of the film Querelle. I think that is suggestive of maybe our being maybe asked or maybe encouraged by Fassbinder and company to really question the very nature, perhaps, of his moral, amoral, or immoral stance. Querelle, is it something that is truly internalized and maybe even psychological, or is there some kind of external force that is, under the whims, or perhaps controlling the very whims and natures of Querelle himself? And I think that's a kind of open-ended question that leads to many different possibilities, and that in turn, I think, is inviting the notion of just how much of the exterior artifice of the truly almost heightened, almost incredulously heightened aspect of the ultra real, or that which is the extraordinary, that is part of the decor and surroundings, very evidently theatrical, very evidently not of a kind of reality based on the one hand, but that's part of the point. We cling to things, we cling to characters like Robert, like Jean Moreau's character, and others, trying to seek some kind of maybe moral substance. And maybe we are confronted by surface hints or aspects of the surface that we think might be indicating one thing, but perhaps are indicating quite something the opposite indeed. And so I think the linkage with, say, that type of moral, immoral aspect of the Querelle character, at least one interpretation of this character anyway, I think goes, I think, really a lovely parallel way with maybe the sort of the drama slash heightened artifice that we see in sort of the decor and surroundings. And so I find that kind of extremity of contradiction to be very much, I think, very much stimulating in terms of a viewership of this film, in terms of one track of the film. But that's, I think, but just one layer of this, because another layer is the way in which Querelle is inspiring or engendering or really maybe creating, sometimes maybe under his control, or maybe in ways that are beyond his control, how people within the world of Querelle, how they react and respond to him. And there are a lot of characters that are shown to be, or revealing themselves to be, in one form or another, very attracted to Querelle, very sexually drawn towards Querelle, having desires of physical yearnings, sexual desires as well. And so whether this is invited by Querelle on an emotional level, or whether this is invited by Querelle for the purposes of his own, say, furthering of his own plots and his own, say, Machiavellian schemes, or whether he is using these desires that are felt by others. In the world of Querelle, it is mostly men who feel this, and we meet a number of men who have a certain sense of sexual desire and want and need and lust towards Querelle. Now we see also how Querelle deals with this and handles this, and sometimes it can be seen as a kind of bartering or transaction of a sexual nature. Other times it can be seen as a kind of power play or power struggle. And other times there might be some possibility of, maybe is there the possibility of some kind of emotional connection, at least that we might interpret Querelle's own situation to be. And so I think these and other questions do emerge, but it is also something to say that there are many different types of relationships. There are many different types of, say, approaches to sex and sexuality. And that's another way to say that one of the really quite quite intriguing ways of the filmmaking of Fassbinder is, and especially in a work like Querelle, it's not just the focus on sex, but also the way in which we see how sometimes it can be sort of very almost the ritualistic aspects of the sexual act on the one hand. There also might be aspects of the way in which there might be sort of emphasis on sort of the active participant and the passive participant. And as I mentioned, sometimes it might be seen as a kind of transactional act. It also might be seen as a kind of act that is an expression of a free will, but it's also expressions of free will based on perspectives. So depending on the participant, maybe the perspective might change. And so this is also creating a sense of maybe many layers of potential nuance and subtlety that I think are part of this, while at the same time really confronting us with what one might be saying, again, much like the theatrical artifice of the surroundings, which might or might not be hiding beneath the surface some kind of core earnestness of human, say, emotion or morality or lack thereof. The same thing can be true of these kind of aspects and approaches to sex and desire and lust and eroticism. I mean, it's really kind of sort of really quite filled with a lot of, say, many levels and many layers, which I admire very much. And so, and as well, too, maybe aligned with that or going very much closely with that, too. The gaze and desire, and oftentimes in the context of many of the plots or subplots of Querelle, male desire and sort of homoerotic, say, feelings and passion and how that's expressed. And so it has, as I mentioned, in terms of the specific plot points of Querelle's story himself, sometimes it might be seen in a certain way depending on perspectives, in terms of, say, progression of plot or maybe some kind of transactional aspect. But there are also aspects of it that are very, I think, purely distilled and quite earnest, and in many ways many multifaceted expressions of sort of lust and desire, which I think are very, very memorable and quite apropos indeed. And this sense of desire and sense of sex and appetite, I think, is also appearing in many memorable aspects of the decor and setting. I mean, there are one of the most famous aspects of this film, which is why I mentioned the set design. I mean, there's some aspects of the film's set decor which are very much not just sort of metaphors for the sexual organ, sort of how things look like sort of the penile sexual organ, but in fact we have things that are part of the set decor that are very much, I think, directly, not just metaphoric, but quite directly representations of sort of sexual organs within the actual environment itself, which I think is a really interesting statement. This idea of desire made manifest. And it's so heightened to the point that we see it in the very structures themselves. But it's also done in a way that we see perhaps characters like Querelle himself almost oblivious to this type of thing, even though it's right there. And so I think that is yet another type of way in which this film shows the matter and antimatter, the hot and the cold, if you will, with Querelle right at the core of that kind of dichotomy, that of contradiction, which I think is so brilliant. And too, this type of expression of desire and lust again. And so I think this film, in terms of certain readings, I think can invite in a very brilliant and great way. I think it can invite readings in terms of representations of queer cinema and LGBTQ themes and concerns, which I think are expressed in a very direct and very earnest way, that are also very compelling and quite nuanced and very multifaceted indeed, which I think is one of the brilliant aspects of this film. And yet, one of the great things about Fassbinder's works overall, and this is something that I think is also acknowledged in some of the supplements, which we'll talk about later, is that it is also a film that is at its core, I think, or as one of its other cores, because it's a film of many cores, I could say, but that are all inextricably linked, and perhaps they're all one and the same. And is also a film that is a human drama. It's a film that is a film noir. It is a film that has heroes and villains. It has heroes and anti-heroes. It has sort of a plot about identity and deception and sibling rivalry and sibling perhaps in air quotes, and we have the possibility of breaking free from sort of confines of sort of various, say, um, class structures that are very much part of the decor here. Class mobility, social mobility is also here, and as well as a sort of compelling nature of control and domination on the one hand, which also has, I think, class implications, as well as implications of say, class and social mobility, which is in turn inextricably linked with QUERELLE's story, which is itself a story about essentially a criminal and a murderer who's trying to maybe carry out a few of his schemes along the way, while at the same time being a story about maybe a frenzy and violence and mayhem, and also a story about lust and desire and gaze and sexual appetite, as well as a film about identity and social strata and social class, as well as being a film about relationships and the yearning and need for hope and kind of fulfillment. And that means that some of the moments here, some of the moments where we are really gifted with a kind of moments of tenderness between the characters, this type of tenderness is really quite emotional. And whether those emotional moments and emotional beats in the context of the plot lead to, say, a fulfillment and fruition of the characters and their character arcs, or and their dreams and ambitions, or whether it might lead down the bitter road of disappointment and betrayal and lies and deceit, or somewhere in between. Again, if you're going to have to watch the film to find out what the final roads are for QUERELLE and the rest of the characters that we meet over the course of this film. With that, there is therefore, I think, so much of the richness of palette, incredibly intense, a very intense film indeed. It is a work that is, I think, on the one hand, and I find this, and I say this in a very complimentary way, it is very confrontational. It really puts things right there. There are aspects of the film that, are very, I think, direct and quite on the nose, all the way down to the way that certain costumes and the looks of the characters appear. There's a sort of a sexual charge that is very much on display. I think Michael Koreski in one of the in his discussion, I think, mentions it very well. There's sort of symbols of say, queer representation that are on display, and we, I think, are I think, welcome to look at those and see them directly as they are. And or we are also maybe seeing them in the context of this matter, antimatter, hot, cold extremity of contradiction dichotomy that is part of the, say, the swirl of this work of QUERELLE. This is a film that is a film of extremities, and I think in a really brilliant way. It's a film that is pulling us in many different directions at once. So maybe it is taking us using certain, say, images that could be said to be inviting a kind of maybe a kind of perception, if you will, of sexual mores and tastes on the one hand, And it is also taking us in another direction, which is asking us to look beneath the surface and to look at surface level, which is very important, but also looking beneath the surface, which is also perhaps equally important, and thus trying to find something of a connection, or perhaps something of the extremity of contradiction, or maybe something that is a hybrid of those two feelings or those two temperaments. And I think that type of dynamism is on display with every frame of the film. QUERELLE. This is a really this is an exceptional work, really exceptional work. You know, it's a film that is very, as I mentioned, in a very complimentary way, quite confrontational, and so in that way, it maybe not is it. It's a film that perhaps is not for everyone, and indeed, no film is for everyone. You know, there are some films that are not to everyone's tastes, and that's true for everything. It's certainly the case for a film like QUERELLE. You know, it is a film that has a lot of intense scenes of sort of directness and sexuality. And so it is, I think, a film that in that way might not be for everyone. But I think it is done in a way that is very honest. I think it's done in a way that is also very much serving of the plot. It is also done in a way that is not gratuitous. And it is also done in a way that is not gratuitous, but also at the same time is done in a way that's, I think, heightened and stylized, and also in keeping with the picture, which itself is very heightened and stylized. And it's also heightened and stylized in a way because we are meant to see things in grand gestures. You know, it's much like an opera. It's much like that sense of seeing the grand gestures of emotion on display in full force, while at the same time being marveled at the fact that we have so many sort of moments of the monotone, almost non-emotional aspects of certain points of this film, such as QUERELLE himself, which I think is the ultimate contradiction, beautifully rendered, wonderfully designed, and it's part of the great enigma and draw and power of this work. Yes, this is the film which is, again, a phenomenal, unforgettable work, described as being from the year 1982. This is the work which is QUERELLE. The Criterion Collection has released this film, QUERELLE, on this occasion, 2024, in this Blu-ray, which is what I have in front of me. It's a single disc Blu-ray, and this is at spine number 1221. This is described as being a restored high-definition digital master approved by director of photography Rainer Werner with uncompressed monaural soundtrack. And so and this artwork is really fantastic. I'll talk about the artwork a little bit later. I think it's great. But we have this in the font and Brad Davis and QUERELLE character, and which is also part of the Blu-ray menu, which is right here. I have the disc in the player right now. And so I should mention here, as I mentioned, it's described as a restored high definition in terms of the master. And I've, for purposes of the discussion, I've taken the liberty of removing the fold-out leaflet, which is part of the release. It's a fold-out with an essay. We'll talk a little bit about this later in the video, but for purposes of right now, let me quote here about the master, and I quote, "QUERELLE is presented in the aspect ratio of 2.35 to 1, approved by director of photography Rainer Werner. This high-definition restoration was created from a 35mm interpositive. The original monaural soundtrack was restored by Eclair Laboratories in 2009. So, you know, my experience with QUERELLE prior to the Criterion Collection has, you know, it's been very limited. And so I was able to watch it for the first time a long time ago, but it was a kind of not the best quality VHS. And so my experience with this film has always been on a kind of not pristine quality in terms of, say, what we might be used to in terms of today's technologies and capabilities in 2024. And so when I watch this film now, you know, and purposes of this this Criterion release, when I watch this film now, you know, I see I still see a kind of roughness to the image. I still have a kind of almost a saturated look, almost perhaps overly saturated look. That might be, my intuition tells me it might be akin to, or might be due to maybe the condition of the materials upon which this restoration was based, or this master work was based. So, in terms of, it's not the cleanest in terms of presentations. Let me put it that way. There is a kind of gauze or a haziness to it, which again may or may not be on purpose, but it is still the best looking I have seen in terms of my own viewings of QUERELLE over the years. And again, I'm not the biggest expert when it comes to Fassbinder works or films. QUERELLE specifically, so I don't hold myself out to be an expert like this. So I don't have a good hold on release history of this film, unfortunately. I've never seen it in the theater either, unfortunately. But what I can say is, again, based on my own limited experience with the film, this is the best it has looked and sounded to me, and so I'm really quite pleased with it. And I mentioned earlier, or just a few moments ago, about how it had a kind of oversaturated look in some places. When it really shines and it goes into these moments of white and blinding lights and titles, and and has these sort of flashes, and we see the sort of the golden hues of yellows and oranges, and the sort of the earthy tones of the seaport area, and those can be really sort of grand and lush and over the top, and perhaps almost maybe quite in an overly saturated way. But in fact, I think that serves the film quite consistently and quite nicely. It's meant to be a film that is calling attention to itself. I mean, it's meant to be a film that is calling attention to the artifice. It's meant to be a film that is showcasing how theatrical things look. That's not a knock against the film. I mean, it's meant to be that way. And so and I think that type of that type of look of for lack of a better phrase, the roughness of quality of the look of the film, I think serves it quite well. And into the soundtrack, there's an almost overbearing nature to how the dialogue sounds on the soundtrack, which I think is very much apropos. I mean, there's a sense of maybe some kind of passion almost about to burst beneath the surface, type of overbearing quality, which again, I say in a very complimentary way, which is to say that this is, for my eyes and ears, the best that I've seen this film, QUERELLE, in my experience of watching this film. And despite what might be seen to be quote unquote flaws, or maybe imperfections, I think those work to the film's advantage. I think those work in a way that aren't inconsistent, that don't detract, that don't distract from one's viewing of this film. At least they didn't do so for me. And so that's my way of saying, overall, it was an incredibly positive experience, one that I could feel almost being invited to recognize in a kind of meta way the theatrical and artifice quality of this film, while also being drawn to the potential of the human drama. Again, matter and antimatter, I think, expressed in how this looks and sounds quite consistently. Okay, so now I still have the Blu-ray disc in the machine. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to go to the supplements menu. So there's the movie, and then there's chapters, and then subtitles at the end here, and then there's supplements. And so when I press the supplements menu, I see 3 supplements that are part of the Criterion release of QUERELLE. So the first one is Rainer Werner Fassbinder, Last Works. I press the button and it says, directed by Wolfgram, this 1982 documentary offers a look at director Rainer Werner Fassbinder's creative process in both QUERELLE and his final on-screen acting role in Kamikaze 89, also directed by Graham. So this is approximately 1 hour, and in fact it could be said to be divided into 2 main components. So the first component is we see Fassbinder on set acting and a very memorable role in the Kamikaze '89. This is the Clem work, Wolf Clem work. So we see him on set or on location, and sometimes being really intense, almost to the point of almost being quite overbearing in his intensity in ways, as an actor almost taking control of the situation, and showing sometimes a little bit of impatience, sometimes a little bit of kind of uh, uh, um, need and yearning and desire in his own trajectory of performance, and all the way down to his look and the costume. I mean, it's really great. You know, Fassbinder. Fassbinder is a sort of an artist of many hats, an artist of many hats in terms of his work in the theater and cinema, of course, but also in terms of his work as a director and also as an actor. And this is true in a lot of his own filmography output. It's also true of films directed by other directors. So it's great to see this aspect of Fassbinder's art, around this time in particular, which again is reflective of this time, circa 1982, just before his again untimely and very tragic passing. So this is one of his legacies as an artist, as an actor, but it's also as a director. And so another part of this documentary is we see him on set, in the stages, as it were, directing QUERELLE. And it's really fascinating to see. And also, I mean, among many things, we see him directing and conversing in different languages, German or English sometimes. And so we also see him really getting into some of the scenes, again, with the same level of intensity. Sometimes we can see it, it's quite, we see him maybe losing his patience at some moments and being really, really intense. But that being part of the Fassbinder work drive, as it were, and really trying to get at a certain, say, essence or soul of a moment or a scene or a performance. So we see two halves of the artist, the Fassbinder, the actor, and also Fassbinder, the director, as well as his interactions with other people, the cast and crew. His fellow performers in the Grimm work, and also the performers that he's directing in QUERELLE. So it's a very interesting, almost a kind of fly on the wall aspect, behind the scenes making of a documentary. It's almost two documentaries in one. It's 1 hour. I wouldn't call it going too much into sort of the analytical or going too much into the career, the wide breadth of the career of Fassbinder. So it's not in that way it's not an introduction into the world of Fassbinder. So if you're looking for that, you're not going to get this in this documentary. But what you are going to get is these really intimate and very, very honest looks at Fassbinder, the artist, both as an actor and also as a director. So it's incredibly worth it. So that's the first of the supplements here, which is Rainer Werner Fassbinder, Lost Works. And that's approximately 1 hour. And the next is Fassbinder in 5, Michael Koreski on an Aesthetic Revolution. This is really great. This is approximately 23 minutes. And so the great Michael Koreski talks about Fassbinder's works in terms of, again, categorization or subcategorizing his works. And it's described as, in this interview conducted by the Criterion Collection in 2024, critic Michael Koreski uses 5 films from across Rainer Werner Fassbinder's prolific career to chart the director's evolving approach to visual storytelling, which culminated in his final film, QUERELLE. This is a really great supplement. Michael Koreski is such an expert when it comes to Fassbinder works. So it's great to see, and his descriptions are going to remind us just how multifaceted Fassbinder's career was as a director. And he goes from different genres and also different sort of cinematic aesthetics, if you will, from what one may call the first era of his works being maybe very sparse and very almost minimal in terms of its theatrical or cinematic style, but also focusing in on in terms of genre, kind of gangster films or film noir films, but also embracing this type of style, and then being coached upon or being influenced or stimulated by movements of Nouvelle Vague or New Wave in other parts of Europe, but then also suddenly being almost influenced by, or being maybe inspired to take a completely different turn when he encounters Hollywood films, Douglas Sirk, etc. And so he goes and goes for a very purposefully and wonderfully stylized sort of melodrama in a number of his works, going into and adopting this type of 50s melodrama as a type of template for telling his bold story. So we have already different facets of his career in this in subcategorizing type of way. And I forgot to mention, Michael Kresge does mention examples of, say, the first category, Love is Colder Than Death, and then going into the second category with films like The Bitter Tears of Peter von Kant, or Ali, Fear Heats the Soul, and the focus on a kind of saturated, a stylized mise en scène that is almost cluttered, but purposefully so, also to mimic a kind of psychological state of the characters, the almost pressure cooker aspect of all the whims and the frenzied fancy of the external, say, expectations of the outside world that may or may not be in sync with the characters' desires and lusts within. I mean, one of the great examples of this in Fassbinder's output is one of his great masterpieces, Ali, Fear Heats the Soul, which is, again, as I mentioned, quoted by Kresge here directly in a brilliant fashion. And also, too, this is allowing Kresge to mention or touch upon components of Fassbinder's career. He has been a filmmaker that has known a certain degree of controversy throughout his career for various reasons here and there. Perhaps, too, he is, among other things, he doesn't shy away from, say, showing, even in kind of a direct way, showing the maybe tendencies of some of his characters in some of his films, the tendency of some of his characters, say, in the specific context of stories like Ali, Fear Heats the Soul, to express racist attitudes or attitudes of intolerance, which is something that Michael Kresge mentions, is something that's it's a very sensitive topic when it comes to German cinema, especially in consideration of post-World War II, post-Nazi Germany, German cinema. And so this type of examination of racist attitudes during this period is something that seems to have struck a real sensitive nerve in the minds of many in sort of the German film industry. And so, according to Michael Kresge, anyway, and so this type of directness, of examination of these types of attitudes is part of the power, the unflinching power of Fassbinder, as Kresge described it. So I think that too is a suggestion of the fact that he uses these, say, templates of genre to really go at and really examine, perhaps to the point of maybe even in a raw, intense way, to examine these very current attitudes and current themes that are very relevant to sort of social, cultural condition, if you will, of Germany post World War II. And also, too, there is a sense of the employment of performance, and how sometimes the performances of the actors can be on purpose, can be very mechanical, very much alienating in terms of maybe an expectation for expressions of emotion, but not getting those types of expected expressions of emotion. And so sometimes there's almost a kind of monotone way that things are delivered, but that's done on purpose, because again, it's meant to, in a circuitous way, draw attention to itself in a way that's very dramatic. And that's also Kresge's way of, I think, linking these various chapters of Fassbinder, including aspects of performance, including aspects of direct handling of social current themes, and also kind of reliance on theatricality, linking that to the final film, which is QUERELLE. And then also going into other films as well, in terms of expressions of despair and what he calls non-traditional polyphonic soundscapes and visualscapes. And he uses another film, In a Year of 13 Moons, which is another brilliant, really, really fascinating Fassbinder work. Uh, and then too, talking about aspects of color and the color scheme and schematics and the looks of the film, and also too touching upon, and not just touching upon, quite vividly, directly addressing aspects of sexuality. And this can be homosexuality. This can be aspects of lesbian and gay sexuality in a way that is addressing physical needs and considerations, and spiritual considerations, and emotional considerations as well. Virility and physicality, and also the way in which this has a certain currency and exchange and relationship. Maybe easy, maybe not easy. Again, going back to currents of the social political climate of Germany during this period. And so this is also part of the equation in the hands of Fassbinder, which is also very much part of the equation when we think about a work like QUERELLE. So it is. And also, finally, too, there's this idea of maybe a focus on death and the idea of the death drive. And in that way, there are these ominous tones of death and dealings with death in a number of Fassbinder works. And that is certainly the case with a film like QUERELLE. And I think Michael Koreski also makes a great point about how, there is a tendency, or there is a kind of instinctual tendency to maybe look at the final film of a filmmaker and look at it as being a kind of culmination of certain themes. But we are reminded too that Fassbinder, again, when he died, again, in a very untimely, a very sad, tragic way. I mean, we understand that he was planning to make another film at the time that he of his untimely passing, and so it wasn't like it wasn't planned to be his final film or anything of that sort. But there is also ways of looking at this work QUERELLE as being kind of culmination, at least up to that point, of course, a culmination of many chapters and many concerns that were very much part of the Fassbinder landscape. From the very early parts of his filmography up to the middle parts and up to the latter parts leading up to QUERELLE. And that also includes aspects of history and reckonings with history prior to the war and indeed during the war, which are also a part of maybe a later chapter, later phase of Fassbinder's filmography, Marriage of Maria Braun, etc. So this is my almost breathless and haphazard way of just expressing my utter joy and real great admiration for Michael Koreski's work here. I mean, this is a really well-organized and a great analysis of Fassbinder and how QUERELLE, this is great, how QUERELLE itself, the film itself, ties into the body of work that is Fassbinder's filmography. So it is an exceptional work indeed. So I'm very impressed with this. Again, this is Michael Koreski's Fassbinder in 5, Michael Koreski on an Aesthetic Revolution. This is approximately 23 minutes. It's really great. Please check it out if you can. And then there's the trailer for QUERELLE, which rounds out the supplements here with as part of this Criterion release. So I am left. I would have loved to have seen just a little bit more in terms of supplements. I would have loved to have seen a little bit more, maybe more. I don't know that much in terms of the production details of this film, except what I've read generally, including what I've read here and also in the Criterion essay, which we'll talk about in a moment. So I'd have loved to have had maybe some more detail about the making of QUERELLE, or maybe the way in which it sort of embodies or doesn't embody, as the case may be, aspects of the Jean Genet underlying work, or of what, or its legacy beyond 1982. And then I think it's a film that maybe due to its relative maybe it was a film, at least from my vantage point. I was very fortunate to have been able to have watched a number of Fassbinder works fairly early on in my cinema journey, and so I was able to watch a lot of them fairly easy. But QUERELLE was one that was always a little bit difficult to access, and so you had to dig a little bit before one was able to find a copy of the film QUERELLE, and even at that, as I mentioned, it wasn't always the best in terms of high quality presentation, etc. But it would have been nice to have had a little bit more, maybe about the legacy of QUERELLE, etc. But or even a commentary track as well, because there's so much going on in the mise en scène of QUERELLE. It's really quite. It's sort of as I say, mind-boggling in the best sense of that phrase. So it would have been great to have had a commentary track. We don't get that, but we do get, and again, I don't want to take anything away from what we do get here, which is really great. Again, the background in terms of the last works as an actor and also as a director, and then also the great Michael Koreski treatment, which is fantastic, absolutely fantastic, and plus the trailer. So again, it would have been nice to have had more, but what we do get is still quite splendid indeed. And so now let's just turn our attention to other contours of this Criterion release, just round out and conclude our discussion here. So I must once again point to the great artwork. I think this is really splendid artwork. It is so, it has this style and grace to it all its own. I think it's really quite wonderful with, of course, Brad Davis's QUERELLE front and center in this really robust way, and there's so many ways to see this, and there's a great font as well, which is very much mimicking the sort of the art decor of the sound stages that made up the film QUERELLE. So this is, I think, fantastic, absolutely fantastic. I should point out, in terms of the art. Oh, and I'm sorry, there was a great Blu-ray menu which I showed earlier, and also just how this color scheme is and the font here is carried through into the back. And we have, in terms of the art director Sarah Habibi, Eric Skillman, designer, this is Astra Zero, and art production coordinator William Braze, and print production artist Craig Phillips, art assistant Julie Sussman. So bravo, well done indeed. And then in terms of the leaflet or foldout, we have the same kind of font considerations here, again with stills too from the film, certain aspects of the film here as well. And then I'm not a fan of the foldout. I wish the foldout wasn't here. I wish it could have been the staple booklet. But that's okay, because we have a great essay by Nathan Lee, which is called Erogenous Zones. And so, again, touching upon sort of the thematic aspects of this film, touching upon a little bit of Jean Genet and also Fassbinder and the context of this film and Fassbinder's career, etc. It's another great essay. So Erogenous Zones is the essay. Again, my strong recommendation is to watch the film first, and then after you've seen the film, you can read the essay, again, which is part of the Criterion release here. And so I'll put that right here, and then we have the disc with some images behind here. There's the disc with the font here, and it has the yellow color, which is, I think, apropos in terms of the yellow-orange tint of the cover art and the art design, which is, again, apropos in terms of how the set itself looks when you watch the film QUERELLE, as well as some images on the back here. And I removed the disc here, but it does have some images of sort of the architectural structures that have a kind of phallic look to them in the back here. So it's, I think, interestingly covered by the disc itself. But when you remove the disc, you'll see a picture of that in the back here. So it's a kind of an interesting choice. Again, it's a film that is very direct in terms of the way it's using certain symbols, both in terms of its background decor and also in terms of the direct foreground as well. So, if anything, it's a very, as I mentioned before, it's a film that has quite a confrontational tone, and I mean that in a very positive way indeed. So, and it's, I think, all part of this package here, this Criterion release, which is for QUERELLE. So. That's the Criterion release for QUERELLE. Again, it's a film that is very bold, and it is very intense. It's certainly not for everyone. That's okay. It is very much through and through a film by Rainer Werner Fassbinder, and it is doing many things at once, and it's doing many things that might seem almost contradictory, but I also feel that that's part of the point, and that's part of its draw. That's part of the way of connection. Again, that sort of that space in between the extremities of contradiction. Again, with QUERELLE at the very center of this, and us again being welcomed and asked to question sort of morals or amorality or immorality in the context of his specific plot trajectory, while also experiencing this world and the people that inhabit it. This world of the Rainer Werner Fassbinder film, unforgettable world indeed, and that is of this film, which is QUERELLE. All right, my dear friends, so that's it for now. And so until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well. And please keep on watching a lot of great movies, including QUERELLE, including other films by Rainer Werner Fassbinder, including other films in the Criterion Collection and beyond. So until the next video, my dear friends, stay strong, stay safe, and cheers.